Today, we're jumping into a really fascinating theological puzzle. It's about a powerful, divine promise from the Quran that seems to fly in the face of reality. And we're going to break down the intricate way one speaker explains how it all fits together.
All right, let's get right to the heart of it. Everything revolves around this one verse, and the language here is incredibly strong, right? It sounds like an absolute ironclad guarantee that believers will always have the upper hand.
But wait a minute, that immediately brings up a huge question. I mean, you just have to look at history or even turn on the news today, and you'll see countless examples of the exact opposite happening. So, how can you square that? How can an absolute divine promise be true when reality so often seems to contradict it?
And that right there is our central puzzle. This divine promise on one side and the lived reality we see on the other. How on earth do we solve this?
Well, according to the lecture we're looking at, the trick isn't to try and disprove one side or the other. Nope. The real solution, the key, lies in understanding that God's will actually operates in two very different ways.
So, let's get into it. The two concepts that unlock this whole thing are what are known as the creative will and the legislative will.
This chart breaks it down perfectly. On one side, you have the creative will, or Takvin. This is all about the unchangeable facts of the universe. It's simply what is. Then on the other side, you have the legislative will, or Tashri. This is about God's guidance for us, the divine commands. It's what should be.
So, let's look a little closer at that first one, Takvin. Think of it like the universe's source code, or the laws of physics. It governs things like gravity, biology, the sun rising in the east, stuff that happens no matter what we think or do. It's totally independent of human choice.
And then you have Tashri, the legislative will. Now, this is more like a divine user manual for how to live a good life. It's the moral code, the path we're encouraged to follow, but, and this is the crucial part, it totally depends on our free will. We can choose to follow the manual, or we can choose to ignore it. The speaker uses a really simple analogy to show how these two things connect. Imagine your lunch is physically made and available. That's a fact of the creative will. The food exists, but there's a rule. You only get to eat it if you show up on time. Following that rule, well, that's the legislative will. One is the reality, the other is the condition you have to meet to access it.
Okay, so now that we have these two ideas, the what is and the what should be, let's circle back to that original verse and see how this framework actually solves the puzzle.
So here's the big reveal. The argument is that the promise that disbelievers will have no way over believers is an unbreakable law of the creative will. It's a fundamental truth baked into the universe's design. However, for that truth to actually show up in our world, for it to become visible, people have to actively fulfill the legislative will. They have to follow the command to not submit to unjust domination. So you see, the promise is always true in the background, but it's our actions that bring it into the foreground.
Now, this isn't just some abstract theological theory. The speaker argues that this very principle is actually a practical blueprint that's woven directly into the fabric of traditional Islamic law.
And here are some pretty concrete examples from Islamic jurisprudence that are cited in the lecture. The speaker points to traditional rulings about things like legal guardianship, testimony in court, or even marriage, and argues that they are all built on this exact same idea. According to this view, each one of these laws is specifically designed to prevent a situation where a non-believer would have direct authority or a way over a believer.
So, the idea is that these laws aren't just random. They're seen as the tangible, real-world ways of fulfilling that legislative duty. By upholding these rules in society, the community is actively aligning itself with the legislative will, and that is what paves the way for the promise of the creative will to become a reality.
All right, to tie all this together, the lecture ends with a really cool, modern analogy for the whole cosmic order that helps visualize this grand design.
I love this one. Imagine the entire universe is structured like a giant Sudoku puzzle. You know how Sudoku works? Every single number has one and only one correct square where it's supposed to go. The whole system has this built-in logic and order.
Now here's the thing about Sudoku. You can force a number into the wrong square. Physically, you can write a 5 where a 2 is supposed to go, and for a moment, it'll just sit there. It seems to work. But what you've done is create a problem, a contradiction. Because eventually, as you fill in the other squares with the correct numbers, your mistake becomes impossible to ignore. It creates a conflict that can't be resolved. The system itself reveals the error. And that's the point. The speaker argues that falsehood is just like that wrong number. It's ultimately unsustainable because it conflicts with the inherent design of reality itself.
And so, this whole explanation leaves us with a really big question to chew on. If the universe really does have a fixed underlying order, like a Sudoku grid, then what does that say about the power and the deep responsibility of our choices? Are we choosing to align with that hidden order and bring truth to light? Or are we forcing a number into the wrong square, creating a temporary conflict that reality itself will eventually have to correct?